Hey everybody, happy Wednesday, and I'm really excited because I've got a really nice video for you today, I think. Personally, I find that one of the best ways to get myself motivated and inspired, especially to do things that take a lot of effort, things that might be sort of difficult relative to other, simpler activities, whatever it might be, it's listening to people telling sort of passionate stories, about their experiences in any given thing. And I've had a lot of feedback that many of you enjoy my sort of storytelling videos talking about my own experiences. And I do think that today, in the current landscape of learning a language online especially, there are so many different resources, different tools, materials, and so many languages available to us to study that it can actually be quite challenging to really stay motivated and inspired to see it through with a single language and take that language to the highest levels if that coincides with your goal, right? And so I want to talk to you today about my absolute favorite parts of really taking language skills to an extremely high level. And I hope that this will serve as, motivation or inspiration for you to do the same. So I would say grab a hot drink or whatever you like, sit back, and as you listen to these stories and these examples, just put yourself in them. Imagine yourself having these same experiences, and if you have had these experiences, then let me know down below. I'd love to hear from those of you who have done this. But without further ado, let's jump in with our Wednesday morning coffee. There it is. So the first thing that I absolutely love when you get to a really high level in a foreign language, it's that, anyone who's reached maybe even an intermediate level, certainly an advanced level, you have these phrases that you learn, right? Where you just know that that phrase or that expression or that idiom, whatever it is, that vocabulary word, it's absolutely perfect in a specific scenario, right? So occasionally you learn a few of these phrases and you just know that in a certain circumstance, that's the perfect thing to say. And what I love about reaching those really, really high levels of speaking a foreign language, it's that almost every single sentence you say, or certainly every other or every few sentences, every conversation you have, you're just dropping these things left and right all over the place. It's almost like everything you say is one of those things where you're pretty confident that at this moment that's the right word or that's the right expression, or I have a great idiom that's perfect for this specific circumstance. It's so pleasant when you're just able to be confident and you see the reaction from native speakers. You see this connection that happens with their heart when you use the exact word that they would have chosen, right? And they just think, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking, right? And similarly, it's great, in your native language when you're talking to somebody and somebody gets stuck and they're like, and then you finish the sentence for them and they say, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. Again, being able to do that, just building up an intuition for not just what's grammatically correct, but what would a speaker of that language say in a given moment. It's so delightful, and I love that. And furthermore, we can take this further. So one thing I personally love when I get to these really high levels is developing also an intuition of different types of speakers, right? So if we take the example of Spanish, now I don't really think my Spanish is to such a high level, but I've started to develop this intuition where if I'm speaking to somebody from Spain, I will actually adjust my speaking style and also the words that I use versus speaking to somebody either from Latin America as a whole or even specific countries in Latin America. So in Spain, for example, my observation has been that people don't say things like riquísimo. There's this word like qué rico, how tasty, tastes really good. And so a Spaniard, in my experience, will say either qué rico, well maybe they would say es muy rico, but they basically stick to rico. Now, grammatically speaking, you can say ricchissimo, right? And I like this because it reminds me of Italian, where I love saying just bellissimo, right? Buonissimo. It's just so much fun, and it really fits my personality. But to a Spaniard, in my experience, they find this to be kind of exaggerated. Like it's a bit over the top. Like, what's wrong with just saying que rico, right? We get it. It means it's really tasty. Why do you have to, blow it out of proportion? Whereas Latin American speakers, again, just in my experience, they are a bit more flowery with their language, right? And they will say things like, oh, it's riquísimo, right? And so if I'm speaking to a Spaniard, I will tend to adjust the way that I express myself to sort of match the style that's appropriate in that given culture, and then vice versa. I will, when speaking with Latin Americans, I'll say things like ahorita, right? I use a lot more of these diminutives because that's more common in Latin America as well. And so, it's just like, even if the person doesn't notice, that's what feels so good. However, there's also things like, if I talk to somebody from Venezuela, I happen to know that Venezuelans love using the word chévere. And so this kind of means like cool or awesome. So Venezuelans might say, oh, qué chévere, right? Oh, that's amazing, that's so cool, right? And so if I'm speaking to a Venezuelan, or also I think Colombians use this word commonly as well, I'll use that word, and usually I get a really big reaction. People say like, oh my God, you know our favorite word. Whereas Spaniards might more typically say like que guay or que chulo. So, there's this delightful feeling when you're able to tailor your speech, and especially when people notice. Another example is with Japanese. So when I was in Japan, I actually started learning several dialects of Japanese. So when I was in Hakata, I was living in Fukuoka, I picked up on quite a bit of Hakata dialect, right? And so one example there is, so the word very, if you want to express like, oh, it's really tasty, it's really good, right? So in standard Japanese, you could say like totemo, just as an example. Now in Kansai Ben, they would say mecha, right? Like mecha umai, right? Mecha, right? And in Hakata, they would say bari, right? So again, if I'm in Hakata or talking to somebody from Hakata, even if we're speaking standard Japanese, just throwing in that word, it shows them like, wow, you know a little bit more, like you know something deeper about me, right? In Kyoto, there's a word mizu, means water. In Kyoto, in the old Kyoto dialect, there's the word ohiya. So when I'm at a restaurant in Kyoto, I will ask for ohiya, and it always gets this beautiful reaction where people are like, wow, you know this word, Now another example in Hakata dialect is that they use this construction with to on the end to ask a question, which does not occur in standard Japanese. And so I remember sitting with some friends getting ramen, and one of my friends wanted to send me something, and she couldn't find my phone number in her phone. So I wanted to jokingly say like, did you delete my number? And so, but I wanted to really deliver this in the most like Hakata dialect way that I could. So I said, keshitato, right? Using this keshitato, this construction, and everybody was like on the floor in tears of laughter just because of the way it happened. And this guy was shouting, Nihonjin, Nihonjin, right? He basically saying, this guy's Japanese, this guy's Japanese. My Japanese was not at a native level. The beautiful thing about that, somebody shouting, Nihonjin da, like he's a Japanese person. It means that like the words that I chose, right, the way that I said them, there's something magical about the entire just interaction where it struck something in their hearts and they felt like I was one of them. And that is something that it's the most beautiful, sweet feeling when it comes to learning a language, in my opinion, right? Someone saying to you, you're one of us, and they're just in tears of laughter, or maybe they're in tears of sadness because you told a story that just really connected with their heartstrings and pulled on them so deeply. Like, that's stuff that happens when you reach those really high levels. And on that subject, one of my other favorite things is just having heart-wrenchingly deep conversations with native speakers. When you're able to have a connection with someone and cultivate that relationship to the point where, you're comfortable talking to each other about all kinds of topics, and that person's comfortable opening up to you and expressing themselves without any barriers, without any holding back because they're not sure if you can understand. When you demonstrate that you not only speak someone's language to a really high level, but you understand who they are as a speaker and as a person of the culture that language belongs to, and then they just open up to you in a way that they wouldn't normally feel comfortable doing if they didn't think you would understand all the words they were saying and the reason why they chose those words. It's hard to describe, but it's just magical. And so, for example, if you were to go back to my oldest video that's currently available on my channel, it's a sort of documentary style video about my life in Japan and my search for a place to call home. And in the documentary, there is a scene where I am leaving Fukuoka to go and live in Kyoto. And one of my best friends at the time, her name is Maya, she's literally in tears. Just saying how much fun it has been knowing you, and she says, I'm cheering you on, the fact that she spoke no English, right? None of those relationships could have happened if it weren't for a really high level of Japanese. And to the point where someone is in tears, to see you leave, to see you go, that is just beautiful. And so, I don't know, I just these are things that are such magical experiences to me. And they're things that occur when you reach those really, really high levels. One more quick example that I love is reading novels, right? So I have a bunch of books on my shelf here, especially in French. I've read more books in French than I've read in English, honestly. And when I read in French, I laugh so much. And 50% of the time, I'm laughing because I really got the joke. And that feels fantastic, especially when you start getting deeply familiar with just cultural references and historical references and all kinds of stuff. Like, for example, there is a really famous movie called Bienvenue les Ch'tis, and it's extremely popular in France, and it's basically a comedy making fun of the Ch'tis people who are from the very north of France. And even in the trailer of that movie, there are some really funny jokes where, the guy's like, I have really bad news. And he tells his wife, and she's like, what's happened? He's like, we're going north. And she's like Lyon? And he's like, no, plus nord, more north. And she's like, oh, not Paris, not Paris, right? And it's funny because people in the south of France, they have this perception that even Lyon, it's like a joke, right? Even Lyon is north, and so just understanding those jokes and understanding why they're funny to French people is great. But when I read in French, I also laugh at things that French people would not laugh at, because I find the way that French people or French speakers express certain things. There's this beautifully sharp, cynical, sarcastic way of delivering, whether it's a piece of information or a comment or an opinion or a joke. There's something, I can't describe it. It's almost like I could touch it. It's just so delightful to me, and it makes me laugh. I just find it funny. And so, just developing that level of familiarity with a language, it's a beautiful thing. So there you go. That's just a collection of very unstructured anecdotes and stories and experiences. But I hope that listening to that could serve as motivation for some of you to really stick with it and take your languages to those extremely high levels. Again, if that is your goal, I know that not everybody wants that, but it's so worth it, and I really encourage you to give it a try. And with that, I wish you a fantastic Wednesday, and I'll see you back here on Friday for another episode.